all 6 visits, I just realized, I was thinking about it, are kind of related. I'm going to tell you how. The first 4 times that I spoke here, I spoke about the Underground Press series, Voices from the Underground. It's a series of histories of different underground papers as written by key people on each one of the papers. Now, if you're too young to remember the Vietnam era, the Underground Press was the anti-war press. It was the dissident press, the independent press. And there were underground papers all over the country, and they spoke to all the voices of what was known as the counterculture. And so I worked here, right here in town. I worked on the Lansing area underground press. The paper then that I was working on was called Joint Issue. And at one point, I wrote a history of the Lansing area underground press. And then we got into the Reagan years. The country shifted way to the right. And anybody who was part of the underground or the anti-war movement then was kind of, there was a lot of intimidation in the area. If you were part of the anti-war movement, you stopped talking about it. People went underground, not talking about it. They started raising kids. The kids had no idea that they had been active. It was the largest anti-war movement in the history of our country. It was the largest in the country, and yet people who were part of that period weren't talking about it, and it was being forgotten. And I was horrified by that. And so what I did was I took the history that I had written and I sent it to people who were part of underground papers all around the country. And I said, here's what I wrote for my paper. Can you do a similar piece with your paper? And I got this amazing outburst of energy. Histories started coming to me. Not all of them were that well written. My role as an editor kicked in at that point. I worked with them to expand them. To who's this person you talked about? What happened here? Give me more details here. Can you clarify? They were holding back. After holding back all these years during the Reagan experience, when I said tell me everything, they didn't even come near to telling me everything. They were so used to holding back. So that's why I kept telling them to write more. But the results were this huge collection of histories. We tried to get them published by the traditional press, the mainstream press, and we got all rejected. And yet the publishers loved the book. To give an example, one publisher wrote, "Rave rejection." What does that mean? Love the book, not going to publish it. And we got enough of those that we realized 2 things. One, it's a great book. We struck a nerve. 2, if we're going to publish it, we're going to have to do it ourselves. And so we did it ourselves. We published one book. It was an 8.5 by, if you picture this, an 8.5 by 11 format, over 600 pages, 2-column format, 2-column 8.5 by 11. It was a huge book. It was copy heavy. It was literally the equivalent of 4 books. I mean, literally the equivalent of 4 books. And so 20 years later, give or take, Michigan State University Press and I connected. And they took that whole huge book and they broke it up into the 4 books that it should have been. And so that's what I've got here today. And the 4 times that I spoke here, each time one of the books came out, because they came out 3 months apart. Each time a book came out, I would give a talk about it. So it was a great experience. But what happened with the people writing these stories, they went through major changes, because this had been, remember us, these were our coming of age years. The Vietnam War. We're coming of age and all this crazy stuff is happening. So it's pretty intimidating, pretty traumatic. And now I'm telling people to write about it. And it was a huge catharsis, I guess, for everybody. I mean, just writing about this history, it really changed their lives in many ways. And I wanted to just give you one example. It's a local example, but it's going to take me a little while to get to the Lansing angle, so stick with me. On Joint Issue, we belonged to Underground Press Syndicate, UPS, who was the first nationwide network of underground papers in the country. And one of the stipulations, one of the practices of UPS membership was that you shared your papers with everybody. So every time a paper would come out, we'd send it all around the country. A lot of work to do that, but in exchange, we got all these papers. Every week we got tons of papers coming to us, and they were just wonderful, and I read every one of them. I loved them. And all of them were, like I said, were against the war, but they had different focuses. The gay press, the lesbian, the black, the military underground press. I mean, all these different genres, so to speak, of the underground press. One of them was different than all the other ones. It was more spiritual. There was a lot of poetry in it. It was a paper called Avatar, and I loved it. And so I knew that when I put this collection together, I wanted Avatar to be in it. It had to be there somehow, but I didn't know anybody on the paper. But it was from Boston. I knew that, and I was working with another Boston paper. It was a paper called Fag Rag. Okay, remember Stonewall, 1969, the Stonewall Rebellion. The gays all of a sudden stood up and said, enough of this shit. You know, no more cops busting our bars. You know, we're going to fight back. And it lasted several days. And as a result, one of the big results of Stonewall was gay liberation fronts emerging all over the country. And many of the GLFs had their own underground papers. So one of them was Fag Rag in Boston. So I was working with Charlie Shively. He was my author of that. And he finished it, and we were having our congratulations phone call. You know, we're done, we did it, congratulations. And so I asked him, do you know anybody from Avatar? I figured Boston, maybe they knew each other, you know. He said, I knew somebody who was kind of peripheral to the paper. And I said, I'll take it, you know, whatever I can get. So he gave me the name of this guy, Michael Kinman. He lived out in San Francisco. And so I called up, I said, I'm looking for Michael Kinman. He said, I'm Michael Kinman. I told him what's going on, what I was looking for, and then I'd be interested in a history of Avatar. So he said to me, well, I could write it. He said, but I was actually better known for my work on another paper from the Midwest. And as soon as he said that, that's all he said, as soon as he said the Midwest, I went, oh my God, you're Michael Kinman, which was kind of anticlimactic. I had called asking for Michael Kinman, you know, but Michael Kinman, it was out of context, so I hadn't thought of it. Michael Kinman was the founder of a paper called The Paper, which was the first underground paper in East Lansing. It was also one of the first 5 members of Underground Press Syndicate. So it was historically an important paper. It was legendary, as a matter of fact. And Michael was legendary for his work on the Underground Press. And here I am talking to him. I mean, I had no idea I was going to connect with this guy. So anyhow, the dilemma comes up. He says, well, which history do you want? Do you want the history of Avatar, or do you want the history of the paper? And without even thinking, I made what probably was the best journalistic decision of my life. I said, just tell me your story. Just tell the story. Oh, wow. So he told me the story. And, you know, he started out in Boston. He was actually from Boston. He came to MSU during if you remember when Hanna was president, and there was that period where he was trying to change the reputation of MSU from a Moo College, you know, the ag tech, to this bastion of academia. And he did it by heavily recruiting all these national merit scholars. And so Michael was part of that first crop of recruits. And they all came here expecting some major, you know, academic gold mine of a place. Well, it was still Moo U. You know, it was not impressive. He got disillusioned. He dropped out of school. He became part of the anti-war movement, and he founded the paper. First 5 members of Underground Press Syndicate. He did that for about 2 years, and then he left town and went back to Boston, and he began working on Avatar. Well, what he didn't know, and what I had no idea, was a personality cult. So he got sucked in. You know, cults, you know, they really mindfuck you. You know, he got sucked into it. It took him 5 years to escape from Avatar and from that whole cult. He moved out to San Francisco. He came out as a gay man. He changed his name to Micah. And by the time I tracked him down, he was dying of AIDS. Pretty heavy. I mean, this was his story. Very positive. even right to the end of his book, the last paragraph, I think, says, I still have AIDS, but I'm confident, okay? He felt really good about that. 2 months after he finished his book, what do you think happened? He died, yeah, he didn't make it. I got a call from his partner that he just died. It was on November 22nd, as a matter of fact, the anniversary of Kennedy's assassination. That's when he died, on the November 22nd. So he never saw the end of the book published. He never saw it. In fact, when we published the book ourselves, we named the press Micah Press in his honor. But he never saw it. But the changes that he went through, the determination to write that book, how it just changed him, I really believe strongly to this day that the only reason he lived that 2 years was that he was writing the book. He was just, and ironically, this was the second person this happened to. I worked with somebody else who also was sick the whole time he was writing his story with me, and he died not too long after it was finished. But it was that motivation to write the book, and what I learned from that experience was how powerful writing a book is. And those were just two instances. I had others too, and that's what led me to ultimately become not just an editor but also a book coach, which is what I do now. I'm a book coach. I'm in the National Speakers Association. Speakers know they have to have books. It's one of these things that comes with being a speaker. You need a book to enhance your credibility. So I help them to write books. But I also write books. I help people who are writing books for healing, other people who are writing books to preserve their legacy. In Micah's case, it was really those latter two. They're kind of related, for health and for healing and for the legacy. But anyhow, these are what led me to become a book coach. So the last time I spoke here, which was the 5th time, I was talking about the first edition. The first edition of You've Got the Time. It came out, actually it was February 27th, 2020, John Steinbeck's birthday. Okay, I always come up with a significant event for my copyrights. That was his birthday then. And we had the launch right here at Everybody Reads. And the book came out to wild enthusiasm. It hit #1 bestseller status in 19 categories on Amazon. It was crazy. Scott kept interrupting my talk to hit #1 in another category. And that was really pretty surreal. Thank you, Scott, for defining that experience. But so the bestsellers, the reviews were incredible. I was getting a lot of talks, invitations to speak. So life was great. End of February. Then March came along. Okay, anybody around for March 2020? Okay, the whole world shut down. COVID just shut down the whole world. So what that meant was that events all around the country were canceled. They couldn't do them anymore, which meant that for speakers who were hired to speak at those events, they lost a lot of jobs. And there was this whole existential crisis within the National Speakers Association. What are we going to do? All of a sudden, here was Zoom. Okay, now Zoom, I think, had been around before that. I'd never used it. But now, all of a sudden, Zoom was everywhere. And the magic word within NSA was pivot. We got to pivot, okay? Which means basically in the speaking world, that meant changing your business model from doing live presentations, at the event, to doing everything virtually. It was a huge change. So I was a little bit slow to that. I'm slow with technology. I'm not I don't gravitate to that. I finally figured it out. But then the crisis ended. People began, speakers began speaking publicly. Events were happening again. All was good. But for me, given my book, another event happened. And you probably don't know about this, so I'll tell you. Within the independent publishing industry, there was a merger between two of the giants. One of them was called Smashwords, which was a company that I used to create my ebooks. and they distributed them. And notice when I say I used them, they didn't publish my ebooks. If you're an independent publisher, you're not being published by Amazon or by Kindle or by Smashwords or any of them. You're the publisher. They distribute it for you, but you're the publisher. So anyhow, in this case, Smashwords, they created my ebooks. They merged with a company called Draft to Digital. Draft number 2 Digital. That's how you spell it. Draft 2 Digital. The two of them merged. It was a good merger. It helped, I think, writers, publishers, and all that. But it killed my book. It killed it. There was this huge section within the book that was so outdated now that I couldn't just tweak it and bring it up to date again and keep on moving like nothing had happened. I realized real early on that I was going to have to do the book over again. So I spent the next 18 months going through the book, and I went through all the chapters. I revised a lot of the chapters. I rewrote others, and I added 4 new ones. So it's a whole new book now. I mean, it's a great book. I mean, it really is a great book. If you're serious about writing a book, this is where you want to start. And not only that, but it's written in a way that even technophobes can understand. And I know that for a fact because I can understand it. Yeah, I mean, that's just how it is. So it's a great book, and I'm really excited about it. Have any of you folks already written books? Anybody? Did you publish independently or
I
traditionally?
used Mission Point Press.
Okay.
And I published I've written 2. The autobiography I self-published, and the memoir Mission Point Press is a publisher of record. So,
Okay.
and I discovered the difference between independent publishing and
Okay.
having a publisher of record, because when you go to a place like Schuler's, an independent bookstore, they won't carry the independent version.
Uh-huh.
They want a publisher of record. So I found that interesting.
Okay, that is. Ironically, I had my first book launch in Ann Arbor was at Schuler's.
Okay.
So did okay there. But yeah, go ahead.
I just published a book, a book about meditation
Oh, good.
and
Okay.
social activism.
And you did it yourself or with another
I
company?
used Freezing Press, so it was self-published,
Uh-huh.
but they did the editing, they did the layout.
Well, if they did it, it's not self-published.
Oh, okay, then it's
So-
not self-published.
Yeah.
But I had speaking engagements
Okay,
on
good.
the East Coast and
Very cool.
here,
Okay.
Schuler's here. I'm trying to think of where else, but yeah.
Yeah.
I published within an anthology that
Okay.
is breaking apart right now.
Oh, okay.
So someone else published it
Right. Okay.
because we weren't publishers.
Right. Okay.
So now we have one book that we only printed about, I don't know, 5,000 copies, and now the book is
Okay, that's good.
no longer existing.
Challenge is selling it now. Uh-huh. How many of you have a book in you?
In me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, some of you are lying to me. Because you know what? Everybody's got a book in them. Everybody has. Not everybody wants to write a book. I get it. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a real commitment. It's a struggle. A lot of tsuris, as we say in Yiddish, a lot of pain in the butt. And so not everyone wants to do it, and that's fine. But if you do want to write a book, you can do it because you've got the time. And this is, that's the number one excuse I hear as a book coach. I don't have the time. And what I'm here to tell you is you've got the time, okay? Not a mistake that I chose to tell you. You've got the time. And there's a chapter in the book. I'm going to take you through a few of the chapters here. But a chapter in the book, make those precious moments count. Basically, what I'm teaching you there is where you can find the time, because you do have it. If you want to write it, you can find it. What you got to do, though, is take advantage of the 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, those periods where average people think doesn't count. It's not worth it. But writers know that this is valuable. This is important. This is precious. You got to use them. So I show you how to use them there. I show you how to use your body clock, even if you have a 9-to-5 job. I show you how to sneak in those moments of writing so you don't lose your flow and you don't forget what you need to write. So that's a real great chapter there. Another chapter about naming your files. I think this is the first time I've ever read anything about naming your files. But it's so important because when you're writing a book, you get a ton of files. I mean, there's so many that you're creating, not only files for each chapter, which is how you may want to start your writing before you combine them, but each chapter is going to have its own file. Then you combine the chapters that into the manuscript. That's another file. And every time you do a new draft, that's another file. Plus you've got correspondence, you've got, writing you're doing for your website. There's so many different files you create, and you need to find them. Often, several years later, you got to find an old file. So if you know how to name them, you can find them. And I talk about the Wachsberger method, chapter 4 here. I've never seen that anywhere else. Chapter 5 is about free writing, one of my favorite chapters. The second most common excuse I hear for why people can't write the book is they don't know where to begin. Okay, what they're saying is, I've got so many ideas in my head, but I don't know which is the first one. And so what they do is they keep it all in their head. Instead of getting on, they just keep them there because you're looking for this mythical, the first idea. And you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. I still call it modern technology. Most people nowadays, they've grown up with it, but from the Vietnam era, any technology that wasn't around in the 70s, to me, is a modern era. Cut and paste. You all know how to use cut and paste. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. But you got to use it. And so with free writing, you take these ideas, you don't know what to do first, just spit them all out. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about mechanics, grammar, and spelling. Don't worry about, uses of the word thing, one of my pet peeves. Don't worry about any of that. Just spit it out. If you've got head trips, I'm no good, I'm not smart, I'll never get this done, I'll never find a publisher, all those crazy head trips, spit them out too. You can put them into another file later on or delete them, but get them out of your head. Get them out of your head. And then once they're on paper, then you start playing the games. To me, that's when the fun begins. Where you just cut and paste and move around, and it really creates. You see the art come out. It's just beautiful that this rough idea that you've got in your mind all of a sudden becomes clear as you move these thoughts around and make sense out of them. So that chapter 5 is one of the cutting edge chapters that I wrote. So that's a great one. Conducting interviews. I've spent so much time interviewing people. Anytime you want to write a book anywhere, you're going to need an authority somewhere along the way. Even if you're the authority, you want to quote somebody else just to kind of back you up. But you got to know how to reach them and how to talk with them, how to put the questions in order, and even how to approach them. It's so easy nowadays. You don't have to sit down with them. You can do it digitally. You can do email interviews. Those are my favorite, actually, because you write them the questions, they send the answers back, it's there. Nothing to transcribe, it's there, you edit it. You always want to edit what they send you, and you can do that. You can take whatever they send you and edit it, as long as, two things. First of all, you can't change the meaning of it. Second of all, and this isn't a rule, but it's certainly a courtesy, you send it to them and say, here's what I did with your quote, is it okay? And most of them don't give a damn. I mean, they're so happy to be quoted that whatever you want to do with it. But you got to squeeze the quote into the area of the book where it belongs. It's got to flow, so that's why you have to do a lot of the editing. So this is a really important chapter. Tracking down experts for forwards and testimonial quotes. When you have a name on your book that's well known in your field, it translates into sales, credibility in sales. You want to do that, and it's so easy just to say well, I'm never going to get in touch with this guy, or this guy's never going to want to work with me. You know, who am I to get a quote from this person? And it's real easy just to talk yourself right out of it. But the reality is, in today's society, everybody is accessible. Everybody. You can find it, either you can find them directly, or you can find them through somebody else. Like, you know, somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows the person. It may take a little while to get to them, but they're all accessible. And you know, my credibility. Just to give you an example, with the Underground Press series, these 4 books here, I've gotten quotes from. I'll throw a few names at you. Tell me if you heard of them. Bill Ayers, Tom Hayden, Susan Brownmiller, Noam Chomsky, Bill Kunstler, Mumia Abu Jamal. You know who he is? He's the most famous death row inmate in the world. I reached him while he was on death row, and he wrote the foreword to one of my books. This book, which is a book about the prison underground press. Mumia wrote the foreword to that. Wow, what an honor that was. But I tracked these people down. One of my Holocaust books, I got Elie Wiesel to give me a quote. So it's doable. It's really, really doable. And so I talk about that here. There's a whole section on publishing your book. Do you want to do it traditionally, or do you want to do it independently? Traditionally means you sign a contract with another publisher. Independently means you are the publisher. And there are pros and cons to both. I've done it both ways. You know, even the Underground Press series, it was we published it independently the first time, and then MSU Press picked it up the second time. So it goes both ways, pros and cons to both of them. But I talk about it in detail here, and then I show you how to do it. If you're going to publish independently, you need to know how to design the cover, to order the front matter and the back matter, you know, all that stuff. I teach you there. Really, really easy. Not easy, but it's really doable. Let's put it that way. I have a section on promoting and selling the book, and there's just I don't nearly touch all of it. I mean, there's so much to promoting and selling a book, but I give you a lot here, including inside a book launch. I talked with 2 people from NSA who are legends within NSA, Kathy Fyack and Lois Kramer. They're both book coaches, actually, like me, book coaches, but they don't edit. This is something I discovered when I first met Kathy. That, you know, she's a book coach. She gives workshops, seminars, you know, all that to help people to write the books. But once the book is done, she doesn't edit it, and she doesn't pretend otherwise. It's not her area. And so, and that's my strong point. That's you know, I do the coaching, but my sweet spot really is editing. So she began sending clients to me. So when she and Lois wrote a book, I edited the book, which was really nice. And this was right around the time that the first edition of the book was coming out. So so I was able to get a chapter inside a book launch with Kathy Fyack and Lois Kramer. Basically, the book came out a month later. In other words, after the first month of the launch, I interviewed them and just asked how it was, pros and cons and all that. And they gave me they just a really some great quotes, you know, that I tweaked, of course. But so that's in there. I have a piece on how to write press releases. Press releases is like free publicity. You just have to do the writing. But once you've done it, you send it out, you put it on your website and it stays there forever, or you put it in a blog and it stays there forever again, or you send it out to the media, but you got to know how to write them. So there's I used to write press releases actually professionally for this tech company. When he introduced me to his staff, he says, "Here's my press release king," which was kind of cool. But anyhow, so that's a chapter, a really good one. And I interviewed Mark Coker. Mark Coker is the founder of Smashwords, which I told you I did, where I do my ebooks, or I did my ebooks. What I liked about Mark is that, I'm also, but before I tell you that, let me back up. I'm also in the National Writers Union. I've been there for about 40 years, and I've been a book contract advisor in the union What that means is that when a member is looking at a contract, traditionally publishing, looking at a contract, they contact the union and say, I got a contract, can someone help me with it? And they contact me. And I read the whole contract, and I comment on it, and I get back to the person, and I tell them what all the clauses mean and how to negotiate them. So, in part, in one part here, I've got like 6 or 7 chapters all devoted to different aspects of understanding a book contract and how to do it. But one of the clauses in traditional contracts is it says that you have to earn a certain amount of money during the royalty period before they'll pay you. In other words, if you don't, it's an arbitrary amount the publisher comes up with, and if your royalties that they owe you fall below that, they don't pay you. They just keep it in their bank. It stays there. It gathers interest. None of it your interest because it's theirs, even though it's your money. And I hate that. I've seen contracts where it was actually as high as $100. Can you imagine that? If you don't earn in academic press contracts, they don't. The academics don't earn that much in the way of royalties. So if you have to earn $100, you may never make that. And it stays in their contract all the time. And I always tell them to negotiate whatever it is. I tell them to tell them you'll pay half, and hope that you'll be able to get that. But the bottom line is they always irritate me. And then Mark comes along, Mark Coker with Smashwords. He pays royalties on a penny. Can you imagine a penny? And I saw that. I thought it was a typo. But he's and I said to him, Mark, how can you do that? He said, well, it's not our money. Which was the right answer, but most people never say that. But you could do that electronically. It doesn't take that much to pay royalties. I mean, the old argument was, well, it's a lot of work. You got to hire someone. You got to, a lot of paperwork to send royalties out and all that. And okay, you can maybe accept a little bit of that, but nowadays it's not true anymore. You can do it all electronically. You can do it automatically. And it's barely any labor involved. So, but traditional presses aren't saying, oh, hey, good, we can pay royalties now. They're still keeping the money. So Mark came along and did a penny, and I loved it. I began using Smashwords immediately. So anyhow, I interviewed him for the chapter, using everything I learned in that other chapter about how to do an interview. And it was a great. He just told me all kinds of stuff about, ways to sell ebooks. So when you do an ebook, you want to be able to sell it. He gives all his ideas, and he's the master. He's the master at selling ebooks. So this is a powerful one. In the section on contracts, a lot of it's how to register your copyright, how to understand it. But my favorite clause was it's called the drunk lawyer clause. Basically, that the publisher hires the lawyer to screw you. I mean, let's face it. The clause, the contract they come up with has everything to the advantage of the author, of the publisher, nothing to the advantage of the author. Basically, there's a competition. We'll publish your book, but we're not going to work with you. We're going to screw you. This is what's happening, and it makes no sense. It's pathetic because ultimately, if you sell a book, the publisher makes money on it. Makes sense. So they should be encouraging you to sell books everywhere you can. Instead, there's a clause in the contract, in the traditional contract, that says you can buy some minimum amount of books at some modest discount, but it says, but not for resale. It specifically says in the contract that you can buy your own book at a discount but not sell it. It's nuts. It's nuts because not only do you not make money, but that's money the publisher can make. The publisher only has so much resources in the way of promotion. So they're not going to be able to find a lot of the places that you go. Like, for instance, if you set up an event, if you speak at an event, if there's a book fair somewhere, they're not going to set all that up. They're not going to come up with that. But if you do it and you're not making any money on the books, it's not worth it to do it. I mean, it's just way too much effort. But if you can make 50% on it, that's good. You sell a book at full price and you keep half of it, that's nice. Now the publisher only gets half instead of 100%, but they're making 50% of something instead of 100% of nothing. Because if you're not selling the book, they're not making anything. If you're selling the book and keeping half, they're still getting the other half. It's free money for them. So some lawyer came up with the idea that they don't want you to do that. And it hurts the publisher, which is the client of the lawyer. And so my only interpretation was it must have been a drunk lawyer. So hence the drunk lawyer clause. It's as a contract advisor, that's one I always tell the authors, make sure you get that. When you change a contract, when they send you the boilerplate contract, what you do, you read it and you can cross out and change, all you want. Every time you make a change, you initial it. That's the how it goes. Now, of course, they're not going to accept everything you do, so they're going to reject some of it. But this one, when members change this so that they get a 50% discount and they can sell, publishers don't usually change that one. I mean, once they explain the logic of it, they go, yeah, okay, I'll go with that. Including MSU Press, the same thing. I got that clause in my contract. He couldn't understand it at first. I had to struggle with it, but he finally got it. He gave me that change. So anyhow, this is if you're gonna publish a book with somebody, with another company, this is a major chapter to read. And again, you're not going to find this in any other book because I don't know anyone else who's been a contract advisor for 40 years. It's just not out there. So that's going to be a really important one. And one other chapter I call the me, you, us theory. Here's what happens here. When you start writing a book, okay, at first you're struggling to find time. You've got the time, okay? You're struggling to find time. But once you begin writing the book, and as momentum begins to build, you're going to find you can't not write the book. I mean, it just happens. You're going to be focused on it all the time. You work 9 to 5, you close down the computer, but you're still thinking of it. You can't get it out of your mind. You tend to push your family away during a time like that. And you don't mean to, you still love them, but your mind is focusing on the book. And so this chapter, basically this is for not only you, but for your family members. Tell them to read it so they understand what's going on in your mind, so that when you get to that point where you're not able to spend all the time with them anymore, it's only temporary, you'll be back. And anytime you can find time to be with them, give them all your best, okay? But you'll be back. So that's a great chapter. And the final chapter in the book, it's just a story about the time that I fought the city of Syracuse. They tried to screw me, and I fought them, and ultimately I broke off diplomatic relations with them, and they broke down, and they gave me what I wanted. But it was all through just a series of letters. So it's writing, the power of writing. So that was just an anecdote there. But that's the book. I skipped a lot of chapters here. I didn't want to go into all of it because that chocolate cake is looking good over there. But there's a lot here. Do you have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
What about trademarking? Is that necessary?
We call it copywriting in the publishing industry,
Okay,
more so than trademarking.
You don't have to, when you copyright your book, that means the cover that you create is copywritten along with your words?
Yeah, it's all. I mean, you may not own the copyright yourself. If maybe, well, you should. You don't want to have someone design a cover for you and own it. So when they design a cover, it's ultimately yours. And getting copyright is so simple nowadays. It's amazing. Back when you would print out 2 full copies of your manuscript, which is a lot of paper, take that down to the post office, which is a trip to the post office, a schlep, another Yiddish word, and then the postage. I mean, so there's a lot of costs involved with that. And then you mail it, and then you wait around. Hopefully they'll get it. Hopefully they'll go with it. But now you don't do that anymore. Now you just send an attachment. You fill out the form online, and you send 2 files. One is the file of the content, the inner content, and the other is the file of the cover, which is color, so it's going to be different color. But you just send it to them, and that's it. And it's so simple. You still have to wait for the paper version of the copyright to come in the mail, but that's off your lap. You don't have to do that. You just wait. But as far as getting the copyright, it's real simple. Yeah, Jen?
I thought whenever you wrote anything, whenever you put it down, that it was then copywritten, and then you just register the copyright.
Well, you're right. You automatically, the moment you write anything, you own the copyright. The moment you write it, it's yours. But you don't have protection.
Yeah.
That's the difference. So yeah, you don't want to just settle for having the copyright. You want the protection. Because if someone rips you off, and you want to sue them, you don't have any protection because you didn't formally copyright it. That's all that is about. Yeah, go ahead.
Question about your 4 books
Yeah.
that you put together. So you had it self-published first,
Correct.
and were those copywritten, all 4 of them in one book,
Well, there was one book.
and it was copywritten?
The way it worked, the individual contributors retained the copyright to their individual pieces. I made sure of that because that's how it needs to be. But I own the copyright to the whole collection. That's all that is. Yeah.
And my question was regarding when you had the one book split up into 4 books.
Right.
Did you have to copyright it again because it was switched
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
from one book to 4 books and then to the MSU press?
Well, it was the second edition, and every edition needs to be copyrighted all over again. You need, if you know what ISBNs are, the identifier, you need a new ISBN for every edition. In fact, within each edition, you need an ISBN for the ebook, an ISBN for the soft cover. If you do a hardcover, that's another one. If you do audio, that's another one. A different ISBN for each one of those. And then if you go into a second edition, you're starting all over again. So those are all different ones. But we had one ISBN for we only did the first edition in soft cover. That's all and there were no ebooks back then. So we had the one ISBN for the soft cover. And then the second edition was what MSU Press took. And that was the one we broke up into 4 separate books. So each book had a hardcover ISBN, a softcover ISBN, and an ebook ISBN. It's available in all those ways now.
And so you had basically 5 different entities to keep track of?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that hard to keep track of. Once the first edition came out, and there's a whole story behind that. I'd love to tell that someday. But the first edition came out, and that was it. That's all I'm keeping track of. Then once the second edition came out, I wasn't really focusing on the first anymore. That kind of was history now. I mean, that was past. I was focusing on the new one, and it was pretty easy to keep track, obviously. MSU Press helped me with it. What I decided was it was too much. It was too big for me to do it myself. I mean, I could have done it, but I couldn't have done justice to it. I just didn't have the skills. So finding MSU Press, which was great. I mean, it was local press to me, since I was from MSU. And my history was the East Lansing Underground Press. So it was a logical one to do. But yeah, once I worked with them, they took care of that. And it's still available from MSU Press. Although if you go to my website, my Zenphony Press website, you can buy the book, but what it'll do, the link will take you to the MSU Press one. Yeah. I mean, if I did it myself, that means that I needed copies, I needed inventory, I needed to do all the mailing of it. It was a lot of work, way more than I wanted to do for all 4 volumes. My other books I've done myself, but that one I was real happy to let MSU Press take.
The last question is about
Go ahead.
holding copyright. So if you have a collection of You said that the writers have their copyright?
Say that again?
You said that they hold their own copyright, but as the publisher, you are the copyright.
Yeah, they own it. I don't know if they I'm sure they didn't register. It's not common to register individual articles. You could, certainly there to do, but not everybody does that. But for me, this was a book.
So is that normal? Do you have, is it monetarily successful having so many people in the books, or?
They get paid, they can't get ripped off. They don't get paid separately with a copyright, their work is protected.
The most people usually, and I've been the editor of a lot of anthologies, a lot of encyclopedias I've edited. The contributors don't make anything really. What they usually make is copies of the book. So everyone who contributed to the book got a copy of the book. And also I made sure, and this is part of my negotiating with MSU Press, I made sure that they also, in addition to me, that they could buy books at 50% off to resell. I don't know how many did. Some of them did for a while. They were excited. Others never did a thing. But it was an opportunity. I wanted them to be able to make money. And again, if they make money, I make money because I was getting a royalty on sales. So, and plus I was buying it to resell myself. So I was getting the royalty plus money from the sales. So anyhow, but they made money by selling the book. And if they didn't want to sell the book, that was up to them. But what they didn't care, the money, none of us were driven by the idea, no one cared about that. No one said, how much am I going to get for this? Nobody asked me that. It never came up. They were so happy at the opportunity to preserve their legacy. This is what they were doing. And you know what? We've already lost about 10 people. In fact, one of them just died yesterday, believe it or not. Maybe you read about her. Her name is Trina Robbins. She's one of the legendary feminist comic artists. Historically, she's right up there. She just died, very sad. But she was one of the contributors to the history of It Ain't Me Babe, which I told you was the first nationwide or nationally distributed feminist underground paper. Okay, that was the first one. So she was part of that one, and she just died. But a number of people, Micah, he's not around anymore. Charlie Shively, who the Fag Rag piece, he's not around anymore. Paul Krasner, a lot of you heard of, he wrote the foreword to Micah's piece. He's not around anymore. But their stories are here. We got the stories. And that was what was so powerful to me. And that was what drove me, that I didn't want the history to be forgotten. And it's here now. The book's done very well. I'm very pleased about that. Yes, go ahead.
Just had a question about, how, if you want to make a movie out of or how do you approach people for movies? Because this book just says movie all over it.
Thank you. I think so too. That's I don't know. I'm not the pro on it, unfortunately, but I know that's the one that I always think of. It's a book called Never Be Afraid. A Belgian Jew in the French Resistance. It's about a Belgian Jew. He fled Belgium with his family when the Nazis invaded, took them to southern France, posed as a Christian, and just through a series of incidents found his way into the Maquis, which was the French Resistance. And it's an amazing story. And this guy was a storyteller anyhow. So you take a guy who's a storyteller and give him a life that is a really amazing story, you get an amazing book out of that. And I was fortunate to meet him. I was so excited to meet him because I grew up in the 50s and the 60s during which was the first generation after the Holocaust. And the mythology that Jews didn't fight back. If you ever heard the expression like lambs to the slaughter, the image was that the Jews didn't fight back. They went like lambs to the slaughter. And I grew up believing it, and it was a fact. It was a fact that they had gone like lambs to the slaughter. So I believed it, but I was always embarrassed by it. Come on, I know you guys are going to get slaughtered, but at least die with your fists up. You know, I mean, I couldn't believe that. So it was years later when I was going for my master's here at MSU, and I took a class on Jewish American literature. And so as my research paper, I did a paper on was there a resistance? And fortunately, I found that there was a huge resistance. Of course, they got slaughtered, but there was a huge resistance. And it was so much that now there was actually a lot of literature about the resistance. And I learned about this conference in Millersville, Pennsylvania, Millersville University. The conference was on the resistance. I mean, that was it was the Holocaust conference every year they had, but the theme of this particular year was the resistance. I mean, talk about, Beshert, another Yiddish word. It was meant to be. I write the paper, there's the conference. So I submitted the paper like a good academic. They accepted it. And I went to Millersville to present it. And it was while I was in Millersville that I met Bernard, the resistance fighter. And what a character, and what an amazing guy. And, I was so... it took me a while to understand that he was in the resistance because he spoke with a thick accent. And when I first saw him, I figured he was probably the father of one of the presenters. I mean, that was how I saw him at first. But as I talked to him and he continued to tell me stories, I realized, oh my God, this guy was in the resistance. He was actually there. He was at the conference now to talk about the resistance. All of us, we were there to talk about our research and our academia. He was there just to tell stories. But it was amazing, and I found myself just sticking to him, kind of like a puppy dog. I mean, I clung to him the whole night, and by the end of the evening, he said, "Anytime you want to learn more stories, just come and visit me. I'll be happy to tell you." He lived in Philadelphia, and it turned out the next year, I guess, Emily and I and our son were driving to New York. That's where Emily's from, and on the way, we stopped in Philadelphia to meet Bernard, and not to meet, but to hang out with Bernard and his wife, his second wife, Minnie. And the next morning, he asked me to write his story. So wow, huge honor. I really dove into it, and it's an amazing story. I mean, it really is an amazing story. So thank you for getting a copy of it, yeah. Any other questions?
Audiobooks, like, if you do an audiobook, do you have to go into a studio and read the whole thing?
Well, you don't have to do it. You can hire someone to do it. I haven't done an audiobook yet, and I will, at some point I will. I just haven't yet. But the technology is getting a lot better. Actually, I have a chapter in the book on how to do audios. And it was so far removed from my personal experience that I didn't have it there at all at first. But I sent the book around to a lot of people, not just friends, but other people who were interested in reviewing it. I asked for honest comments. I gave them some specific questions to answer, but I asked for comments. And anyhow, one friend of mine got back. He said, "Ken, you got to have a chapter on audiobooks." And I said, "I don't know anything about audiobooks." He said, "You got to have it. Technology, me with the freaking out about technology." But I found somebody who did audiobooks. I interviewed him again using the methods from my book. And it's a great chapter on how to do audiobooks. It's not the end all, it's not the only way to do it. Actually, with Draft to Digital, if you work with them, they can connect you to a company, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but they do audiobooks. And they give you a good price, So that's, but yeah, it's in the future for me, and yeah, they're out there. And it's another ISBN, like I said, don't forget that. ISBNs, when you get ISBNs, think long term, because they're fairly expensive. If you don't want to get just one book, one ISBN because you're doing a soft cover. You want to get, first of all, at least enough to cover the book, in all versions that you're going to do, but then figure, well, I wrote one book, and it was kind of cool. It's nice being an author. I can do more. I've got more books in me. So start planning ahead and buy enough. Just to give you an example, I've got 100 ISBNs for Zenfinity Press. Now, I haven't used nearly all of them, and I'll probably die with a lot of them. In fact, I'm writing my will already, and I got my addendum of things I want to pass on to the kids. One of them is my list of ISBNs, because that's a commodity. That's valuable. It costs a lot of money now. When I got the ISBNs back in 1987, when I did beer cans on the side of the road, I think they were free then. I don't remember for sure, but I know for a fact that there's no way I could have afforded 100 ISBNs back then. There's no way. And yet I've got 100 ISBNs. So maybe it was free, maybe it wasn't. But the bottom line is that when you start thinking of ISBNs, which you have to get, and don't take free ones, the organizations that give you free ISBNs, you don't want that, because every ISBN is registered to a particular publishing company. So even if you publish it yourself, if you use their ISBN, it appears as if they're the publisher. Okay, so you got to do your own. Does that answer your question?
From
Go ahead.
conception to finish, what does that look like for majority of the people who you deal with? Are most people just creative human beings, or do you have to, I don't know, make them watch Sesame Street on Wednesday night? I mean, because it takes a lot to talk about things that you may not want to talk about, and also write them in a way that's not offensive to other people.
Are you talking about writing things that are personal?
Yeah.
It is tough, and that's why writing a book transforms your life. But what that means is you got to deal with those issues. And one of my strengths as a coach is that when people send me their manuscript and it raises all these questions, I ask the questions. What do you mean by this? Who's this? Can you expand here? And ultimately, when people are working with me, they want to deal with the issues. So, not everybody knows it. When I work with Bernard, Never Be Afraid, I had no idea he was going to have a breakthrough. I asked him one particular question, and he broke down right over the kitchen table. He just started sobbing and sobbing when he finally got through. He struggled for a while. I don't remember. He didn't want to even answer the question. But then there was a silence. And one thing you learn as a journalist is don't step on the silence. Okay, real important. What the silence means is that they're thinking of a good answer. The question was so good, they need time to come up with a good answer. So you don't want to step on the silence and ruin that. And so I didn't want to step on the silence, but it was taking him so long to answer the question that I started thinking, uh-oh, he hates me. And if he hates me, he's going to stop the interview. I'm going to lose the whole book. It's all over. And so part of me was saying, ask another question. I'm asking another question. On the other hand, I'm thinking, don't step on the silence. So I was going back and forth. And at one point, I said, I can't wait anymore. And I was just about to ask him another question. In other words, kill the whole book. But I didn't know that. I was about to ask him another question when all of a sudden he said, yes, I remember. And he broke down. He broke down right over the kitchen table. I asked him about if he had ever killed anybody, one-on-one. And he was telling me about this one particular experience. You'll read that in chapter either 18 or 19. The chapter is called Like Blood Out of the Aorta of a Pig. That's what the chapter is. That's a pretty wild chapter. But yeah, he broke down right over the kitchen table, and it changed him so much. And he was the second person I told you about who died not long after finishing the book. He broke down over the kitchen table. He'd been, he came to live with us for 2 weeks. He and Minnie, his second wife, his first wife, who had survived the Holocaust with him, she came to America, but then she died. He remarried Minnie. So Minnie and Bernard came, and Bernard had to take sleeping pills every night just to get to sleep because he was so worked up about this book. And yet every morning he was always the first one up. Sleeping pills to get to sleep, first one up every night. This night, when he had this breakthrough, whatever you want to call it, that night for the first time he didn't take sleeping pills. And the next morning, when I woke up, he was still sound asleep. So it was really, wow, it was pretty powerful. We wrapped up the interviewing soon after that. That was interview 11 out of 12. I was using the old cassette recorders, the 90-minute tapes. You flip them over, 45 minutes on each side, and we went through 12 of them. But it was on the 11th. So he was already pretty worn out by this time when he had the breakthrough. And so we wrapped it up on the 12th, and they went home after that. I finished the book, sent it to him. He loved it, he approved it. And not long after that, he moved into a assisted living. His family moved him into that, and soon after that, he died. So it was good. But he had found peace. When he, after he had the breakthrough, at the end of that tape, he said, "I'm now ready to see my ancestors." This is what he said. And so after he died, he saw his ancestors, but he was ready for them now. He had dealt with whatever this issue was that he was holding back. Really powerful, and it's a powerful chapter, and one of the favorite chapters I've ever written. Okay, so hope you enjoy that.
If I can interject,
Go ahead.
my experience being around this guy for a little bit, and the people that he works with, some of them just write out and they're great, and I, if I'm thinking part of what your question was about, and they write and they write and they write that, like he worked with a woman who was a Rockette, and it's her story that if anybody know the Radio City Rockettes, she lives in Dexter. She's a great gal, and she just went for it and did it. There are people that Ken has worked with. It's like pulling teeth, and it's harder for them, and they have more challenges. It's not easy, because partly I think with people, we all have our stuff, and some people it's hard to work through their stuff, and they do come up with, "Oh, I couldn't write yet last week because I had a doctor's appointment," or so and Ken works with them to get through some of those blockages. But there are times when there's rare clients where Ken has had to say, "I'm going to let you go for now. I'll be here when you want to come back, but I'm here to help you get this book through, and I'll still be here, but I can't keep chasing after you," kind of thing. I mean, he doesn't say it that way, but it's one of those. If I think I was hearing your question,
Yeah, that was exactly what I was talking about, because just listening to him tell the story about this gentleman, my whole mind can just see him at the table, just thinking, and then just having this breakthrough, and then everything in his life changes because he changed.
mm-hmm.
It's not even like it's yeah, I see it.
And that's Ken as the author. There's Ken the author and Ken the book coach, and they're two different people. I can. And so.
And then there's your husband.
And then there's yeah, right. And so working with people are different, and when he's working with people, it's a process in of itself to be a book coach, to help people to walk through that process. And I, as a trained therapist, he actually uses some of those techniques with people, and some of that's discussed in his book as, during the interviewing chapter, because as therapists, Jan, you're in that class of people, and you learn certain techniques as an interviewer to try to get through to people, to help them along to grow and move through a process. So anyway, hope you don't mind anything.
No, that was good. That's okay. Made me look good.
Yeah.
Not easy. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I just realized that I've already kind of written a mini book
Oh, cool.
and given it away hundreds and hundreds of copies. It's about how to do tarot.
Okay.
And that I've already been thinking about different ways to put dream imagery and just a few hours ago, maybe days ago. And that I can actually do that.
Oh,
I
right.
can't spell, and You know, I thought, who needs that?
You got the time.
Yeah. Because I didn't think I had that in me.
It's pretty exciting.
Any other questions?
Anybody want?
Who wants some chocolate cake? Thank you very much, everybody.